celebrated the 200th anniversary of the Constitution, the bicentennial brought out considerable debate regarding the convention in Philadelphia, which led to the document being submitted to the states for ratification during the celebrations and debates. A decades-old theory resurfaced to considerable debate among scholars and historians in 1988, followed by lobbying interested groups. The U.S. Congress passed a resolution to acknowledge the contribution of the Iroquois Confederacy of Nations to the development of the United States Constitution. According to the Congress, many of the democratic principles, which were incorporated into the Constitution itself, originated with the Iroquois.
How you doing? My name is Antonio. My page is Unapologetically Black. I ask you to like and subscribe to the page. Let me show you exactly what Carter G. Woodson means when he says the miseducation of the Negro. How many of us understood that the natives had constitutions prior to American settlers or European settlers? How many of us knew that? How many of us knew that the American Constitution was based off of the Native American constitutions? We would not know these things because Europeans are masters at hiding history, lying, trying to cut off our ties to our lineage and our history as a people. It is time for us to re-educate ourselves.
The convention did not keep formal minutes of their discussions and debates, though several of the delegates kept meticulous notes. James Wilson's Pennsylvania personal notes mention the Iroquois form of government, but do not debate over its perceived merits. Benjamin Franklin and George Washington were certainly familiar with the Confederation. Having negotiated with them, John Adams was also aware of the Iroquois system of government, which he viewed disapprovingly. Here is the debate over whether the U.S. Constitution and the American Republic owe its form of government to the Confederation of the Iroquois.
What did he disfavor about the Native American system is socialism. He disfavored the fact that he would have to do his own work. That's what he disfavored. He disfavored that it was not a system of capitalism where you can control the resources and force someone else to use their labor to extract the value out of that resources. That's what he disapproved of with the Native American form of government.
Before settler colonists showed up, North America had quite a bit of socialism already. Native Americans, and I'm very much generalizing here, organized advanced societies on this continent oftentimes along pretty socialistic lines, meaning things like collective ownership and management of economic resources, environmental stewardship instead of resource extraction, intra-clan democracy, and multi-clan democratic federations.
It was socialistic, the indigenous socialism collectively. This is why native property wasn't recognized, because it was collectively owned.
That's Roxanne Dunbar Ortiz, by the way. She's the author of this book. In it, among other things, she talks about how indigenous nations like the Haudenosaunee, also known as the Iroquois, organized along more socialistic and democratic lines than you might expect. Dunbar Ortiz specifically mentions how this allowed Native Americans to thrive for centuries, when, by contrast, some European colonizers in the early 1600s had to resort to cannibalism and coprophagy. Please don't Google that word. According to this famous book, here, it's been argued by historians, and even recognized by Congress, that the Haudenosaunee Constitution actually influenced parts of the US Constitution. So, beyond just happening in the same place, this history had some bearing on our current government. Though, admittedly, not that much, because, well, we'll get to that. Anyway, calling pre-European America socialist is a bit of a stretch, no doubt about it. North American societies before the Crackening were incredibly different from one another. They had important shortcomings relative to contemporary socialist politics, and socialism would just have to look very different today, post-industrial revolution. It's interesting, and to this day, socialist politics continue to inspire indigenous activism in the US, with groups like the Red Nation, for example, and vice versa.
See, you have to understand, they have denied that there was any form of government that existed when they arrived in America. Now you look and see when they was forming the Constitution that they acknowledged that there was a government here. Why did they lie about these things, and how much have they lied to you about? and what are the implications behind those lies. What we'll come to find out is that you are the original inhabitants of America, and you already had a government established throughout America, well established, and that we've been here for a long period of time, and that the international slave trade from America to Africa was all a lie. And what you will learn is that the slaves that did arrive here in America came on ships from Europe, and those were black and white indentured servants. This is what you will learn, and you will learn how the natives who they enslaved were the natives who rebelled against seeing that form of enslavement.
The Federation considered themselves to be a chosen people. United chiefly by language, the member tribes of the Iroquois called themselves the Ongwayone, which translates to real human beings. What that implies for members of other tribes, and for the Europeans who settled in the region, is in the eye of the beholder. According to oral tradition, the only record of the pre-colonial period, the peacemaker explained the relationship between the 5 tribes, later 6, symbolized by taking one arrow from each, which were bound together. The arrows represented peace, reason, justice, health, and righteousness. This led to later claims the United States included arrows in the Great Seal based on the Iroquois imagery. In the first iteration of the Great Seal, 13 arrows appear in the talon of an eagle, representing the 13 original states. The Congressional Committee which designed the seal made no mention of the Iroquois in their debates or notes. While the Confederation maintained a more or less peaceful relationship within the member tribes, they were often at war with rivals, the Huron and Wyandot of the Lakes, the Shawnee and Miami of Ohio, and the Cherokee of the Carolinas and Tennessee. Canadian tribes, the Erie Abenaki and others, were pressured by Iroquois expansion. The Mohawk, recognized by the Confederation as the keepers of the Eastern Door, gained the reputation of fearsome warriors, noted for their brutality toward prisoners. During the Beaver Wars of the 17th century, Mohawk and other warriors of the Iroquois fought the Huron and other western tribes, determined to establish a monopoly on the fur trade with the Europeans. It was during the Beaver Wars that European traders first openly supplied the Iroquois with firearms, and French suppliers attempted to break the Confederation by negotiating separate treaties with individual tribes.
What we will realize when we begin to look into our history as a people and connect with who we are and our legacy, we will learn that what Europeans was able to do is take advantage of the diversity that comes within the melanated nation people on earth. Because we have so much diversity, they mastered the art of what they call classification. They begin to classify us as different tribes and races of people. We begin to accept those classifications and begin to look at each other differently. And as we begin to accept those separate classifications, they introduce their system of capitalism, and we begin to compete with one another in order to obtain favor in trade with them. It is imperative that we recognize where we went wrong as a people and how we get into the condition where we are subordinate to these uncivilized groups of people. This is why it's so significant for us to reconnect with history and understanding our condition and how we got here. White people was able to benefit from the similarity in all of their skin complexions. Then they was also able to benefit from the fact that it is a minority of them, and the most of the planet is filled with melanated people. So they was able to take advantage of that diversity, right, and use their whiteness as a form of solidarity. We accepted their classifications, doing deals with them and business with them. This created a division amongst us that allows them to conquer us tribe by tribes. We have to understand the significance in creating a united front. This is what Europeans or Britain had did in order to transfer slavery to race-based, is they created power in the identity of whiteness.
The Beaver Wars resulted from increasing trade between the Iroquois and the Europeans. The arrival of the Europeans in the realm of the Iroquois, then comprised of 5 tribes, meant war at first, followed by trading relationships. The French to the north, and the Dutch, Swedes, and British to the east of the Iroquois lands established trading posts, creating a great demand for pelts, particularly beaver pelts. In exchange for the commodity, they provided metal tools, pots and pans, cloth for blankets, knives in some cases, firearms for the native leaders. Such items enhanced their prestige within their clans.
Now that should sound familiar. To this day, we're still following the blacks with the most shiny objects. We're still following the blacks with the jewelry on. We're still following the blacks who we see with the most luxurious car. And time again, we come to find out those blacks betrayed their own people in order to get those things from the white people. So history would teaches us that being in love with Europeans' wealth is something that sets us back as a people. History would tells us that we should focus more on being producers rather than consumers, and that's the best way for us to achieve true freedom. Because being a consumer is what got us in the conditions that we are in and left us open to these Europeans coming to our land, reclassifying us as African Americans and Negroes, classifying themselves and others as natives to our land. Our obsession with Europeans' wealth when we had already established a form of developing resources and lived off of for hundreds of years.